Well, good morning, everyone. So it's so nice to see many of you again. I know that we've had a little bit of a break, I think a couple of weeks. And so we're here for our last masterclass. Those that's going to be joining us in our cohort in June. We have one more session that's coming up, and that's to make sure that you get prepared for your experience at UNC Chapel Hill. And today and this month, we have a wonderful friend, budding relationship to heritage, and a phenomenal crusader, I would call Simran, in making sure that balance is not just something that it's an afterthought, but it's a practice of life. So for Scale Up Your Skills in this session today, we have one of the most incredible, insightful people that I have gotten an opportunity to learn a whole lot about, and her name is Simran. Simran, welcome to HSCF and our masterclass today.
Thank you, Tina. Hi, everyone.
Hello. So just to give you a little bit more about her background, and please feel free to make sure that you raise your electronic hand, or you can come off of mute. We want to make sure that this is going to be highly engaging and interactive. And most of you know, if you've been following us on social media, as well as just the world, this month is Mental Health Awareness Month. And as women, leaders, men all over the world, a lot of activists, advocates for making sure that there's a path for clarity. There are resources and organizations that's helping many of us to just unpack what we're thinking, what we're going through, how we make those professional and personal choices. And today, we have Simran that's going to walk through her journey and her experience. She's had over 20 years in the technology service industry, multiple businesses, multiple verticals, multiple continents. Her passion is making sure that she can create a competitive advantage through the use of technology by using or by improving experiences of employees, different businesses, their employees, partners, and customers. She's the executive partner at IBM. She's responsible for a multi-million-dollar consulting service business with a top global strategic client. She grew up in Delhi, India. She has a love for technology. And when she was in high school, her high school principal suggested that she pursue a software development career. And she got accepted into top colleges, and she has an undergrad degree in economics. So remember, we always talk about not just understanding technology, not just developing it, but also understand how you make money. How does it impact the world and the world economy? And so she studied both economics and software development. So you don't have to do one, you can do multiple. She also earned a degree, one of the schools that programs that I graduated from the Triumph Global Executive MBA from London Business School, or the London School of Economics, I just say Business School in Paris, and Stern Business School in New York. Again, she holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in economics from Hindu College, Delhi University, and a diploma in software engineering from the National Institute of Information Technology in India. She lives in Sweden, and she has 2 beautiful children, and she's there raising them with her husband. So Simran, welcome, welcome, welcome. So how we're going to start this off, we're going to discuss who you are so people can get a little bit more insight about who you are in your journey from growing up in India to where you are today and being one of the top leaders in IBM.
Well, firstly, thank you, Tina, and Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, wherever you're joining from. Thank you for the wonderful work you're doing, Tina. You're an amazing role model for me and many others. Where I am today is that, that little girl who really, the only, I think, ambition that was given to her was to make sure she was educated and she had a job. So she was as much possible financially independent. In hindsight, where I'm today, I would say it was a very small dream, really. I wasn't, sure what all I could do until the focus was completely on education. I'm raised by a single mother, and back in the 80s, 90s, when you're growing up in India, it's not one of the most pleasant experiences as a child. But my mother's focus was always that I was educated, educated, and educated. That was her single focus. And as I grew up, I, finished school, got top grade, got into school. A lot of people came along the way and, gave suggestions on careers. And one of them was my high school principal, who suggested to study technology. And in those times, technology was in the rise as it is today, but it was at the height of like a big pivot, particularly in India. And I think that got me my start. And over the years, one thing led to the other. I also left India after 2 years of working. In India, I went to the States and I worked there. Then I moved to Singapore with my husband. I worked there for 3.5, 4 years. And then life brought us to Sweden. And one could wonder, when you make a lot of changes, it gets difficult. Every country you move in, you don't have a history, you don't have friends. It's like a credit card. You have no credit score, right? You have to start
That's right.
from scratch. And I think today, if I look back, it's a skill that I've learned to not be the first one to knock the doors. And in my current job, it's extremely helpful when I speak with clients and talk about what we do and how we partner. I think it helped me get over that fear of speaking to new people. Because when you're going through that journey, you can always feel that insecurity, unsurety. Where am I headed? What am I doing? Especially in new countries, when you don't have friends, no family, no history, and you're not staying long enough. So I think today I am I'm over the inhibitions of what could I do in my career, both for my own self-confidence, which I think is a very earned one over the years, but also when other people are coming and sort of bringing your attention to next level and next level. And it's an interesting journey where a lot of times we doubt ourselves, whereas you have no idea what other people are thinking about you. Or they might be telling you that, hey, I see this in you, and you say, well, I don't see that in me. So I think it's hugely helpful. So to summarize, that little 5-6-year-old girl, since I remember my childhood from, I think I've come a long way from just focusing on education and being able to make money to really knowing what am I good at and where would I be going forward. And even when I joined IBM, I wasn't really sure what exactly I was going to do, other than the fact that I was keen on doing something complicated, something I hadn't done before. I wanted to take risks, and I wasn't going to fail. I was going to always give everything that I could. And then I leave the outcomes to up in the divine. And then one thing led to the other. The other key learning is, pay attention to the opportunities and grab them when they come your way. Don't let it pass.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was one of the things that I think throughout, a lot of people have heard me say intellectual curiosity, having that motivation of always wanting to learn more, expand your mind, which is the reason why we have these. So Simran, I know you gave a summary, but I want to unpack a couple of things. So when you were a little girl and your mom was telling you to focus on certain things, you saw what your mom and your parents went through, as well as people within your community. What do you recall as being one of those defining moments where you knew that you had it within yourself to be able to go out and do whatever you want to do, regardless of what society was telling you, regardless of what others were telling you in your community. Because let's face it, women going into technology or engineering, it's not something that has always been at the forefront and promoted. But what was the point where you said, you could do it?
So I think outside of my education, when I was in grade 7, it was a summer vacation, and your child and your parents are looking. And back in the days, we didn't have a lot of summer activities as much as we have now. Even in a country like India, it's amazing how much it has changed. But I remember vividly that we had to do something, and a neighbor of ours, their kids used to go to an art class just 2 kilometers from where we lived. And my mother said, okay, well, why don't you go do it? And I think that's when one of the shifts of life happened, that I started learning art. I started learning little things like baking and sewing and gift wrapping and candle making and flower making. Started doing things with your hands, and you just realize this power that you have using your hands, and you can make things. So I think that was the foundation for me, that whatever I put my mind to, I can make things. And I think that has lived with me until today. Every time I'm unsure or I want to do new things, I have that confidence that if I'm going to put my mind to it and I'm going to use my skills, I can crack it. So that was my first one. I mean, there were many after that, but that one I really remember at the age of 13.
Was there a time or a moment where you weren't as confident?
Oh, definitely.
And how did you handle that? Because I know quite a few young ladies that we have, as well as others that's watching, and I can speak for myself. But you said something very important. Until I actually did it myself and use my hands, that's why we always have hands-on activities, because it shifts your DNA. You will never be the same person after you've done something and you've opted in. That's the whole that motivation, that intellectual curiosity of learning. You will never be the same. But before you even do that, what was that time where you were really unsure, and what were the ways in which you walked yourself to overcoming that?
So several of them. I think fundamentally, while as a child, I was an intelligent child, as I'm told, and I look back and there are a lot of signs of it. But I think I definitely had self-esteem challenges. I'm also blessed with a logical brain. So every time I realized that, oh, there's a problem, I need to deal with it, be it anything, I think my logical brain kicked in, and I would go and educate myself, or just practice. And one of the very important examples today, when I'm told that I speak so well, or I'm I'm very articulate, I'm very brief. I mean, a 14-year-old girl could barely speak English. And when I had that realization, the way I conquered that, I took the English newspaper. We used to get Times of India, which is still a national newspaper in India.
Yeah.
And we used to get both the English newspaper and the Hindi newspaper at home. And I don't remember why we got the English newspaper, because most of the members of my family were always reading the Hindi newspaper.
Okay.
That part I don't know, but we had that newspaper. So I just picked up the newspaper. I would go to my room and I would just read as I'm a news reader in front of the mirror.
Just on your own. You just decided to do that on your own.
I just decided to do it.
Okay.
I just read. Maybe a lot of times I wouldn't understand a lot of it, a lot of words, but I didn't focus so much on trying to understand every single word. And that is a national newspaper like The Economist of India. So it has quite a high level of English. And at that age, I wasn't so bothered about learning every word, but I read like I was a newsreader. And similarly, many other such challenges. If the moment I realize it's a challenge or it's a blocker, I need to do either unlearn something or learn that, I would get to reading and figuring it out how to educate myself. And that was the first one. So it's quite interesting. Every time I hear this now, that, oh, you're very articulate, I'm like, yeah, I'm so proud of it. That's an earned skill.
I know,
I say
right?
anybody can do that, if you put your mind to it.
Yeah, you can. I mean, I will say that there's a lot of forces that subliminal messages out there that say that you shouldn't or that you can't, and you still have to figure out ways of how you will overcome that. So moving from wanting to read the newspaper and standing in front of that mirror, which I think I may have tried to do that with French. I'm not quite sure if I was as successful as you, but it took a little bit longer. When you wanted to go into technology, so everybody knows, I read your bio and how they were steering you, but you still had to have it within yourself. And I want to get to not just the decision to pursue it and do it, but from a cultural standpoint, there's a lot of pressure for a myriad of reasons and coming from a myriad from different sources. When you're thinking about what you had to, I would say, push yourself to do, a lot of people that's on the call, a lot of people that's going to be watching this, a lot of young ladies, and the world's pressure today to be excellent, almost perfect, which is toxic and detrimental. How did you move forward knowing that there were so many challenges, or maybe you didn't have any challenges, it was an easier path for you? But in your thought process, because you think logically, was there anything that you had to move out, any noise that you had to move out in order for you to move successfully in technology?
I think, yeah, the answer is yes, but let me take a back step and tell a story, right? With good intent, a lot of cultures, not just India, the intent is good from parents to think about when should their daughters be married. And I had the same thing, even if I was, given the possibility to have good education. But there was that time that when you're around 22, 23, you finished your undergrad, you're thinking of doing your master's, and there's a conversation kicks off. And that could definitely have a fear around it, that if that happens, will I be able to do everything else that I want to do? And you sometimes don't even know what you want to do at that age. So at least for me, I left. I found work in the US and I moved out to do that. And it wasn't easy. I didn't have the support, but I managed to convince, and I left with my 3 bags. And I think that was at the time my way of shutting the noise and focusing on doing what I wanted to do. It's not always needed to move away. You could just move into a different state, or anywhere else, or sometimes you're lucky enough that you can negotiate with your parents and have them understand your view. But yeah, I think the learning is not giving in, and the learning is it's a decision I made, and I lived with the good and sometimes the not so good that came with that.
And what were some of the not so good things? Because I think a lot of people, just to expand on that a little bit.
Loneliness. I mean, a lot of loneliness. You're totally, you're constantly scared that what if I fail? And in hindsight, again, with the good intent that our parents always sort of have for us. But sometimes they also could feel, right, okay, I wish she comes back. I wish it doesn't work for her and she comes back. So a lot of loneliness, a lot of sort of lack of support could make you doubt your decisions. When you have difficult days, you feel, oh, was I, it's human to think about it and say, oh, maybe I would have been better off if I had stayed. I would have been better off and if I did that or this, that. So, but you learn to deal with it. And again, now, if I look back, I think that's the biggest asset, to be comfortable with yourself and the alone time, getting to know yourself. But when you're going through the journey, it can feel, quite hard. And then not having friends and having to make new friends. And sometimes you get great friends. I'm also fortunate that I've met some fantastic people over the years, but sometimes you don't. And not having your childhood friendships, with you, versus if you're staying in your home country or even in your home state or hometown, your childhood friendships sometimes continue forever. And I think that's something I've missed out on.
Mm. Because you had to build a whole new life in a
A whole
whole
new
new
life,
world.
not once, twice.
Yeah, but yes, yeah, I'm quite familiar with some of those, but the technology space. So now going into corporate work, America. I was going to say, I'm trying to say world and corporate America at the same time. How did you manage dealing with some of the stress, the pressure, having a family, um, and trying to put yourself where you can explore that self-care so that you can have balance? How did you manage that?
So firstly, I think the balance comes much later in life when you realize there is a need for balance. When you are in the middle of all of it, you just, at least for me, I kept trying to do the best I could. And especially when I had family, the kids are young, and you've got to work. Sleep, you start giving up on your sleep. And when you're younger, I think it's still easier versus now, where I guard my sleep. It's like a sacred thing for me. So I think the balance part came much later, when you sort of come to a point in life and you realize that you need to let go of certain things and focus on things that are priority. If work and family's priority, you minimize your social engagements. And it's like ruthless prioritization in life, but it's a journey. There's, for me, there's no like a book or a list that, if I knew this, I could have done this better. I think everyone has their own journey, and some people have just a higher tolerance for pain, if I could say that, or stress, that they can deal with it. And I think that's something I've had that from my childhood, that I could deal with it. But looking at now, where the phase of my life where I am today, and self-care is sacred, sleep is sacred, prioritization is sacred, I would say, well, one shouldn't have to go through it. At the same time, it also has the positive of it. It builds character.
Yeah, talk about that.
Yeah, we have to find what's each person's peak. Some people's peak is really high. Some people break down earlier. I think each individual need to find that peak for themselves, and then understand how they need to deal with not reaching that peak and fall flat. And my personal peak, it has been quite high.
Yeah, I think I have a high threshold of pain as well. And I will coin this by saying, I just wake up every day and you're just a soldier.
Yeah.
Sometimes, but soldiers sometimes hurt themselves. So I had to learn the hard way. It had to be a loud thunder in order for me to realize I needed to take a break and take care of myself, both mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and not be that workhorse that we're coined as being, especially when you're in the tech space. So I don't see any questions in the chat yet. So ladies, and we're going to check Facebook as well. Make sure you're posting your questions or any comments or thoughts to Simran, and you will come off of mute. And if we don't see you, we would love to see you so that you can ask and interact with her directly. So what I want to do is just to unpack, well, what is your job today? And how does the whole balancing act component, give us some, a peek and some perspective to the breadth of what you do, the amount of clients or interactions that you have on a day-to-day basis, and how do you squeeze in that family time and your personal time?
So I'll answer the latter one first on the family time. I think that's thanks to pandemic. That has helped to make up for some of that lost family time over the years. What I do at IBM Consulting, we are a technology consulting firm where we work with probably every large enterprise business on the planet to provide technology services and build solutions to help their businesses do better. My job, I live in Sweden and I work out of Denmark. I am responsible for all of the business we do with one of our very strategic clients in Denmark. And the job is to have a mutually successful continued partnership and build some amazing technology solutions for their business transformation. That's what IBM is all for. We love to call ourselves that. We run the technology side of the world's largest businesses. A lot of times you wouldn't even know that IBM is behind that, but that's what we do. That's what I do. And there's been a lot of travel, indeed, before the pandemic. I think 2019, I think half the year was in the plane.
Traveling.
Yeah, and I've sort of learned that the balance is in every day. If I look at the whole year, it would look like a very unbalanced year because I've not been home. But then when I'm home, we make the best. As a couple, we are very driven by our calendars. We plan a lot in our lives. And we've also over time learned to prioritize what's important to us. If work has its space and its importance in life, then certain other things don't take priority. We've also learned to say no to a lot of things, a lot of external engagements, and prioritize our kids, their schools, their after school activities. So a lot of planning goes into it. And I think without a doubt, if you have family and you're married, it goes as a team. I wouldn't be able to do it alone. Absolutely not. And my husband has an equally, busy career. So we've got some rules. We don't travel at the same time. We're never in a flight on the same day, even if it's a short flight in Europe. We never do that. One of us is always in town. And when we are in a situation where our calendars are conflicting, there's no ego about mine is important or yours is unimportant. It's about who can step up to make it work for the other person.
No, that's a team effort.
Yeah.
And you need to have that. So we have a couple of questions that have come in. Lauren, if you can come off of mute and ask your question.
Do you have any tips for us on how to find our peaks?
Sorry, Lauren, find out what?
Your peaks. So Lauren, are you talking about your peak performance? Okay.
So it's a very good question. And I think pay attention to how you feel when you're at your best. How do you operate when you're doing your best work and when you're doing work that you have to do, but you're not really excited about it? So I think pay attention to those moments, and that'll help you get a sense of what drives you, what motivates you. And there are always times in life that we all have to do tasks, whether it's work tasks or home tasks that we will not be very excited about. And that's the name of the game in life, that we just have to get it done. And there's some tasks that you just take help with, seek help, whether it's your friends, your family, and others. So I think that's what I would say. That's what I do when I know that certain tasks I am naturally going to procrastinate because I'm just not good at that. So I pay attention to that.
And it's okay.
It's absolutely
that's the main
okay.
thing. It is okay. Sometimes you just need to give yourself that break. If I can
sorry, Tina, I was saying the earlier in life you know that, the better it is. That what you're good at, where you're naturally good, what naturally drives motivation, doesn't feel work, you wake up excited about it, and the things that you don't wake up very excited about it. So the earlier in life, the better it is. And your peak comes by doing more of work that you don't find excited. You don't find exciting. And you'll know that your peak comes because it'll just mount. You'll feel it stressful. It'll just mount. Your body will feel it. Don't ignore the signs. Pay attention to those signs.
Yeah. And I would say another thing too, and this was something that I learned later in life, is journaling. The earlier you can start just writing down things, how you feel about something your parents ask you to do, something that your school or your teachers or your work, they're asking you. Don't ignore those feelings, but start writing it down and then go back to it, a week later, a month later, and see if you still have the same feelings, but also more importantly, see how many times you have written down the same thing. So now you know how to start canceling some things out.
Yeah, definitely.
Right.
I don't journal as much, but I do write sometimes when certain things are sort of in my head and I haven't done them. I'll just write them down and I'll go back and see if they're still important and if I need to prioritize. So again, yeah, finding that journaling style. And actually, I can give you a recommendation. There is a famous book. I'm forgetting the name of the author, but it's called Morning Writings. Look it up. It comes with a whole booklet that you write 3 pages of morning writing, where you just get up in the morning and you write whatever comes to your mind to just clear your mind. I've heard it's a fantastic practice. I've not adopted it yet. I have the book, I have the booklet. I just haven't gotten to start to do that. But I generally write a lot. But this is a dedicated practice that you wake up in the morning and the first thing you do is just write 3 pages of writing, freehand writing, whatever is in your mind. And so that will help with the pattern, as Tina suggested.
So let me just turn this around a little bit. So Laura, I'm going to take your question and just ask it directly to Simran. So how did you find your peak?
By not prioritizing myself, by doing everything that came my way, especially a lot of family demands, commitments, also sometimes trying to keep a lot of people happy, and then there comes a point in life when you realize, now I'm reaching my peak, I'm going to break. And that happened with me about a decade ago. And that is when I went on my self-learning, self-healing, self-discipline journey. And it's a journey. I think I'm really good right now compared to where I was 10 years ago. But it's a lifelong journey. You can only get better. But about a decade ago, I reached my peak.
And what did you do when you reached that peak?
I sought help. That is my biggest learning in life, that reach out for help. Even if you don't get the help that you're reaching out to the people, the people you know, don't limit yourself. Go to people you don't know. You'd be surprised the amount of empathy in the world that exists. I used to be the person who would want to always do everything on my own. And I would want to be this, superwoman. And I'm sure many type A personalities, both men and women, go through that. But don't limit yourself in seeking help from your extended network or people you've just met somewhere, but you thought they could be of help. Reach out.
Yeah.
And I reached out to somebody I had met at a conference a year ago, and I reached out to her like a year later, and she was absolutely open to helping me out.
No, I think that's important. So that leads to the next question that we have. Ava, if you can come off of mute and ask your question.
Yeah, hi. So my friend, Lily, she wants to go into the technology industry, but I feel like she has a hard time balancing like what she wants to do and like what she needs to do for her technology, because she loves to just like go and like 3D print and like play with coding, but she doesn't get a lot of time to do that because she thinks she's so focused on what she has to do. So is there anything that I can do to help her?
How old is your friend, if I may ask?
She's 14. 14.
Okay. Wow. That's a interesting one. I need to put myself in a 14-year-old. I have a 14-year-old daughter. I think firstly, I'd suggest she sits down and writes everything what she's doing. Where is her time and attention going, right? And because we all have 24 hours in a day, and then she should prioritize. Does she have to do all of that? Is it something that's just being done because it's just there, she's doing it? I think then the second step she should take is about prioritizing it. What is important for her? If there's a list of 15 tasks she's doing or 15 things she's doing, and then technology or getting into a technology career is extremely important for her, then I hope that comes in her top 5 priorities. And once she has her top 5 priorities, I suggest that's where she should put her 80% of the time.
Mhm.
That would
Yeah.
help her make that decision.
I think that's a good suggestion, because all too often, we would do things because we think other people want us to do them. So I would look at the list and also ask, okay, well, what is critical? So is this tied to school and my schoolwork? What is extracurricular and what is just extra? And then who's asking me to do these things? Sometimes that list, you will have your name right beside it. You're the one that's asking yourself to do those things, but you don't know. But I think it's, yeah, Simran, I think that's spot on. If you only have 24 hours, and if you don't map out what you're doing, it's almost like when they talk about if you want to lose weight, log everything that you're eating in a day or in a week, and then you'll be surprised at what you're actually consuming. So I think it's very similar. But for you, I would say, because that was one of the questions that you asked from yourself, how you can help her, right? That's what I'm seeing in the chat.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think Ava, you can sit down and just help her. Let's write down this list together, because sometimes it's just by having a person there in that journey with you when you're stressed and when you're struggling, and there's no judgment. It's just offering that presence that can also help her feel, and she may have to do all of those things, right? But it's knowing that she can count on someone that can be there with her and for her. That also helps. Okay, we have another question. Maddie, if you can come off of mute.
Hi, good morning, everyone. So my question is more of a request. If you can kind of give your perspective on the importance of having support outside of just family, because I know that a lot of people do rely on their families very heavily and they get a lot of support from their family. But some people, especially now, don't have that resource as much or at all. So
thank you, Maddie. Really, really important question. I think it's a lifelong question about your extended network. It's invaluable. Your family, of course, is your biggest strength, biggest support. They could be people who could be in the same profession as you, sometimes not. They could be people who would be always there with you, whatever you do. But as you grow in your career, and if you've chosen a path that nobody in your family has, the need for relying or reaching out or building that external network is even higher. So it's extremely important. It's extremely important for broader perspectives beyond your family. I am a firm believer that our life and our perspectives are only made up of our experiences. And if you want to have a bigger, broader perspective, you need more experiences, and that comes by putting yourself out, talking to people you don't know, and building those relationships. So if I could change one of the things, I would start doing that very early in my age.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that.
Go to schools. I mean, you go to these heritage camps. I think that they are a fantastic place to build those external networks at your age, or in your school, in your communities. You could volunteer, by doing things and building that sort of more than the network, also trusted relationships that you could have conversations at the time of need.
Yeah, and Simran, so in preparing for this, you talked about just a couple of authors or books, Brene Brown being one of them. How when you're networking, make sure there's some questions and some vetting that you need to do, because not everyone earns the right to hear your story or to be in your space, and you have to be protective of that. And in particular, in talking about just mental health, you have to be protective. We want you to also to network. So it seems like we're saying two different things, but it's asking the questions. And also, well, one, you always start with your family first. And then as you build your network, you start to look for those things that's common, where you have common interest. And it goes back to what Simran was talking about, that level of empathy that people have. You're going to be able to source and assess that throughout as you're building, so that you can share, so that you have your personal board of directors that you can go to. And that was something that I learned, and I didn't even know that term until I started working in corporate America. And I wish I had much more of that, especially being one of few, women that's in, engineering or mechanical engineering. You want to make sure that you're building that cadre. And fortunately, I did go to a school where there's some phenomenal women that I was able to connect with different organizations. So some of you are interested in technology or going into engineering, Society of Women Engineers. There's a cadre of organizations that you can start looking into and possibly joining, depending on your age. Some of you are a little younger, but they are definitely there. And all of these wonderful people that we have coming through the organization, like Simran and some others that you all have met, feel free to reach out to them via LinkedIn. They'll be able to offer some very good, solid advice. And again, it is non-judgmental. They are here to help you. Okay. Are you good, Ava and Maddie and Lauren? We got your questions. All right, and now we have a parent. This is a parent that's been around for quite some time. So Stephanie, I want you to come off of mute so you can ask your question.
First, I want to say thank you for putting this session on, just as you've done so often. These are very, very valuable sessions for the students as well as myself. I attend because even as an adult, there's still so much you can learn. You don't know everything, and it's all about growth. So I just want to thank you. My question is, can you provide any advice for these teenagers? Most of them are very busy with, academic stresses. Nowadays, there's so much pressure to do well academically. They have interest, extracurricular activities. And while doing all this, trying to find a balance, they're still teenagers, doing things that teenagers like to do and having a social life. Any tips to maintain a healthy balance with all these things?
Thank you, Stephanie. Again, and it's a really good question and very close to my heart as the mother of two teenagers. I'll share what I and my husband have done, in our lives. Sometimes not everything works in every situation, but the way we've raised our children, we firstly kept them not so focused on academic achievements. It's important, absolutely. They have to do well in school, but there's a lot of extracurricular activities they do. And then I know one of the things, when I was 15, I remember I had this vision that I was not going to treat my children as children, even when they were 1 year old or 2 years old. I would always treat them as I'm speaking to a fellow human, nearly an adult. So I never spoke childish language with my kids. So I spoke with them always as I'm speaking with anybody else. And then over time, they've been a lot into reading, which I think is an extremely important way of learning, even if you don't know the people, physically or anything about them, just by learning from the work they do. And I think with that, it has helped them manage their social life quite well. It has also helped them prioritize. I think they've learned that prioritization quite early in life. They've got few friends, and again, it's on the calendar, it's planned. And I vividly remember some of the incidents where if my daughter had a swimming lesson and she would come and then, oh, my friend's calling me. And my answer was, you decide, it's your priority. And if you have to go to a friend's house, it needs to be around your activities, not canceling an activity and prioritizing the social part of life. And I think that helped her make those decisions herself. So I think now when, if they have social activities, they sort of know when it will fit with their life, because they also have school commitments and extracurricular activity commitments, and they know that their parents put in a lot of time. And as two traveling parents, it is not easy to juggle evening activities after school to drive them here and there. And we live in a world where we don't have chauffeurs easily available. If I was living in India, probably I could delegate that service, but not here. It has to be either me or my husband. And you can only take babysitting services or driving services for a very limited time. So there is a lot of responsibility on us. So I think they're quite aware of that, and we've made them consciously aware of their own calendar, and also that they need to prioritize. If they don't prioritize their extracurricular activities, then they will not happen. So it's a choice they need to make. So I hope
So
that helped, but it has worked for us so far quite well.
So you provided a process, tools, and a way for them to say no sooner.
Yes, I
learned that later in life, how to say no, and it was a complete sentence.
Right, and I made them responsible for the choice they were making and what will they want to give up.
So Stephanie, does that help? That's interesting. Yeah, so
it's very helpful.
Yeah, I like that. How did you know to do that, Simran? Trial and error?
Yeah, I think trial and error. It's probably the way I probably would have wanted my childhood. So I had that quite early on, that I was going to treat my children as adults. And I think they say it openly, that you've always treated us as adults, that every time we would have a difference of opinion on something, we'll sit down and talk. I'll give my reasoning, you give your reasoning. If yours is compelling, I'll give in, I'll rest my case. But if mine is compelling or my husband's is compelling, then you go with what we are suggesting. So I think that has built us that trust that our parents are not telling us or saying no because they just want to, they're saying, well, we're not saying yes or no, we're saying, what would you choose?
So let me take this actually out to the audience, and by raising your electronic hands, how many of you feel like you can say no to the barrage of things that you are working on, or what's on your calendar? How many of you feel like you can say no? Okay, I see a few. Okay. So I think it's about 50-50, right? And it's okay. It's okay. Now, so how many of you feel like if you can't say no, how many of you feel the pressure to do all of the things that you're doing to excellence? Because I want us to have a real honest conversation. Okay, I see. I see. Yeah, I see several hands, and that is a lot. Hopefully, the things that we're talking about, and I feel like there should definitely be a part 2 to this conversation, because we can't unpack everything. And what we want to do is to make sure, one, we're providing things for you to help balance and look at what you can say yes to and what's for you, and those things that you should try and you realize they're not for you. And some environments are a lot more demanding than others. So we're going to have a part 2, because I think that second question that I asked, that's something that I want to make sure that we're unpacking. And I can't tell, I think most of the hands that's raised, I think you're going to be with me at UNC Chapel Hill next month. So we're definitely going to dive into that. Okay. And if you're not with me at UNC Chapel Hill, make sure that you reach out to Valeria. That's, I think, Valeria, if you can raise your hand, make sure you reach out to people, because we want to make sure, again, that we're providing some services, some conversations, and all the things that we can to make sure that you're balancing your life. It's a lot of pressure that we have out here today. Let me see if there's any more questions. Otherwise, I do have some as well. Okay. All right. So there's just some comments. Ava says, I like to pack my schedule full and I want to do everything. So no matter how busy I am, it's just hard for me to say no. You will get to a point, Ava, and I completely understand. You have youth on your side. So you have a ton of time and energy, but there will be a time when other responsibilities start to take over. So you're 14 now. By the time you get to high school, you're going to have other pressures that's coming on where it's going to require much more time for you to devote to completing certain tasks, studying for the SATs, filling out those applications for university. They're going off to university, having all of those other things. And even if you don't go to universities, because I know that there's quite a few people that's watching, and you're going to continue your education, maybe not formally, but through the world, you're going to work. You're going to have bills, you're going to have relationships, all of those things, they're going to start to take precedent. And you're going to realize you cannot be everywhere and do everything that you want to do. You're going to have to do those things that you have to do just for surviving, and all those other things that come in between. Simran, there's a couple other, so Maddie has another question. Maddie, if you can come off of mute and ask your question.
Hi again. So I actually probably speak for a few of us when I say this. I know I definitely speak for Ava here too. I've grown up as a gifted kid. I was identified gifted at a very young age. So all throughout my life, I've been in special classes, more advanced this, more advanced that. And I'm actually still in middle school. I'm in 7th grade. But next year, I'm going to have to choose between going into a high school academy locally here or a prep school in a different part of where I live, which is Virginia. And I think both are definitely some good options, but I'm not sure quite which one to take, because I actually have to decide if I want to try for the academies or try for a scholarship to the prep school by the end of the school year. And I only have about a month or so left. So.
Thank you, Maddie. Again, a really important question. This type of decision making will happen many times in life. How do you decide what is good? You also used the word I see in the chat, safer. I would suggest don't go for safe options. Go for options where you would have the higher possibility to learn more, expand your horizons. Safer options are go take the degree, you're going to get the career or the job that you're interested in. You're going to get all of that anyways if you're focused and motivated. But this is the time in life where you should explore and take risks. So look for options where you would have more learning than what it says. And that's something I've used a lot in my professional life. Every time I need to make a choice on what role I should take, I actually go for the one which doesn't have a clear description, because then it has the opportunity to do the way I probably would like to do things, or it has the opportunity to do more than what the role asks for it, and you learn a lot more than the simple description of job says. And similarly for education, I think I know Tina and I have our personal reasons for doing the executive MBA we did from the same institutions, but there is a common reason. It was the possibility of expanding our learning and also the breadth of the network. I'm sure both of us could have picked up a program closer to our homes. I certainly could have at 1/3 the cost. And I was also advised by one of my leaders at the time to build local network. But if the goal was not to build the local network, but the goal was to expand my horizons globally and make me a global minded, human and a future leader, I chose the program I chose. And for many, it could seem wrong or a risk, but go with what you want to do. So I think that's how I've made decisions. I'm sure, Tina, you might want to add something here as well.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So two things. One, I always say do the hardest things first, because you have especially for the youth, you have the most amount of time and capacity in being able to absorb. The second is I did the opposite of Simran. Well, I think most of my opportunities, they were undefined and they were new, and I had to try to figure it out, as well as the businesses had to figure that out. And then I reached a point of my career, probably 15 years in, and I said, okay, I'm tired of building new, because my brain was being saturated. I want a job that I can take to the next level, not build an entire organization, or I have to do turnarounds, because I was in operations a lot. So that's very thankless. Everybody wants everything to run smoothly until it doesn't. And then but then once I got into something that was traditional, I was yearning to get back to something that was explorative. And in those moments, that's when I learned the most about myself, people, business, the world. And that's where you truly come into your own. It's in that gray area. And when you push yourself beyond what you thought that you weren't able to do. But then there are limits to that as well. So it gets back to the whole self-care component, because you're putting so much of yourself into the unknown. It does take a lot more energy and brain capacity, and it takes a lot more time with your personal board of directors to make sure that you're staying balanced. There's a few more comments and questions, and I'm really liking this. Lindsay, no.
Yeah,
CT.
Lindsay has a-
Oh, okay, CT, you were just making a comment.
Lindsay has
Yes,
a question.
yes, Lindsay.
So, sorry. My question is, what do we do when we don't know if we just say yes or no?
Take a step back and think. Don't respond immediately. It's a really mature thing to do, that I don't know, I need to think, I need some time, I'll get back.
Mhm.
It's really, I cannot emphasize the importance of not responding immediately. Even in your gut, sometimes you know the answer, that it is a yes and it is a no. A lot of times, if you step back and think about it, you can have a different answer, and you also give your space to choose differently.
Yeah, I would agree with
Don't
that.
feel the pressure of responding immediately ever, whether you're in school or in university or in a professional environment. You can always take a step back, think, and come back with an answer.
Yeah, and talk it out with some people. Talk it out with your family, with trusted friends. Again, going back to that personal board of directors. We're almost out of time, but if we can extend just a few more minutes, I want to make sure that we answer and address all of your questions and comments, and if there's some others just out there as well. CT, you have a comment, but if you can come off of mute and explain your comment, talk about that a bit.
Okay, which one did you want me to talk about?
Oh, you have, this is the one, your mother.
Oh, yes. Growing up, especially with like homework and doing things, I usually always had a lot of free time growing up other than school. So my mother, when I came home, we had a schedule that like she would make for me. And then after that, it was my job to uphold that schedule. I would come home, get a snack, and then work on my homework. And when it came to homework, she said that to do the thing that took the most time first. So that was math, which it usually was. Do math first, because that would take up the most time. And then in that order, do the thing that would take the most amount of time until I didn't have anything to do. And that really helped me with time management, as well as some other things like also doing the hardest thing first, because usually if you do the hardest thing first, you have support, because my mom would go to work in the afternoons. So if I did the hardest thing first, then at least I had her there to help me when I was doing that thing that I really struggled on. So that really helped me.
Yeah. Yeah, I live by that. And I think Ava, similar to your mom as well. So you all have some really good moms that are helping you to try to reduce and minimize your stress, because they know they're not fortune tellers, but they have traveled a journey, and they know that some of these things that we're talking about today that you're going to face, and they're trying to help minimize your path. So in closing, so one, if there's any other questions, make sure that you let us know in the chat, and we'll make sure that we can get those things addressed. Any questions that you have directly for Simran, definitely come off of mute and ask your question, or if you have a comment. But Simran, I'm going to turn it over to you to close us out. And I'll ask, if you had to tell your younger self how not to be as stressed, how wonderful you will turn out, and how wonderful you still are, what would be those things that you would convey to her?
I think first definitely would be self-belief. That goes without saying. I mean, if you have self-belief, we all can do a lot more than we think that we can do. And in addition to all of that, I would be, again, not prioritization for sure. It's not an adult skill. I think it should be taught as teenagers, that why prioritization is important, so we don't feel that we have to give up something, or we have to give up the immediate gratification of a party, or going and doing some things with our friends. And that's something, at least I try to do that with my children. Definitely that would have been helpful, as all of these things are self-taught. A lot more reading. I'm quite proud that I'm a voracious reader now, but a lot more reading. I think there was a question earlier that talked about extended or external network. And if you don't have people around, books are your best friends, because a lot of authors are very kind to write about their lives and their journeys, and you can learn a lot from their lives. You don't even need to speak with them to learn from them, and just apply that wisdom or apply those suggestions in life. And explore. Don't worry about taking risks. I remember, at least the way I've grown up, by the time you're 30, you had to be top executive somewhere, had to be married, had the kids, had a home, It was just, and this list was never listed out in writing for me. It was just there. It was just in your mind. You have it. And I remember when I was 30, I think I was married and I had a home and I was working. I didn't have kids and I wasn't a top exec yet. So you could feel that you're not achieving, and that's absolutely wrong. I think explore a lot, at least in your 20s. Travel, take risks, meet new people, live independently, live on your own, get to know yourself, and also learn to control your brain and emotions. You do that, you can master your life.
Wow.
Everybody will turn out fine. Everyone will turn out fine.
And if not, I tell you what, there's plenty of people around to be able to help and support. And I see that CT would like to reach out to you. So I just tell everyone, get on LinkedIn, and that's how you can get connected to a lot of our special speakers that come through. They're all living out in that world. And you know what we like to do? We like to make sure that we're preparing you for your best future. So get your little profiles together, and we're going to help you build your profile. I don't care if you're 14 years old, you can still have a profile on LinkedIn, and that's how you can get in contact with our guests. So Simran, I want to thank you, and I can't thank you enough for when I reached out and you said absolutely you would love to come on and invest your time into this next generation and just being so open and gracious, providing insight as well as your background so that they can take a sneak peek into your life and see how they can possibly mirror some of the things that you've talked about so that they can have a better path. So thank you again. I'm sorry I kept you all over, but this was such an important topic and a really good conversation. And again, I think we're going to have a part 2 to this. There's quite a few things that we still didn't unpack. Humanizing technology, we didn't even get to that. And hopefully Simran will grace us again by coming back and we can explore that a little bit more. I know a lot of people are interested in technology and just the ways technology have found its way in our personal lives, not just our professional lives on a day-to-day basis. So that can cause some stress and that can also alleviate stress. So we would like to unpack that. So anything else, Simran, before we sign off today?
Well, thank you. I mean, it's been a wonderful conversation. It's been great to reconnect with you, and some fantastic questions, made me rethink some of the things I did, how I dealt with something. And humanizing technology, if I could leave with one thing, it is for humans, it is about humans, it is not against humans. So use it for your benefit to have a better life and better experiences, but don't let it sort of dominate you or take over your time. So follow the all the rules that come these days with our iPhones and apps, where you have the possibility of switching them off, switching them all the notifications so you don't get distracted. And there is a wonderful book that I recommend that it's written by the same author who 10 years ago wrote a book called Hooked, to make products, digital solutions that would get human attention to the degree that now we feel stressed about it. But the same author finally has realized that his recommendations perhaps have gone beyond what humans would appreciate. It's called Indistractable. It's not about technology, but it's also about all the tools that you can learn to be indistractable, how to handle distractions, not get distracted. And I'd love to have a follow-on conversation whenever that happens. So much to talk about and so much to learn from the younger generation.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, I wish you all a wonderful Saturday, rest of the weekend. For those that's going to be joining us at UNC Chapel Hill this summer, we're super excited in June, and those that's joining us in July. Your information is going to be coming out soon. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. And on our social media platform, for those of you who are stressed and feel like there's no other place for you to go, there's some helpful resources that we do have out there. And if you cannot reach out to anyone, you can certainly reach out to us. We are here to help you. So have a wonderful May, and we will see you all next month. Take care. Thank you so much, Simran.
Thank you, Tina. Thank you.